This episode is brought to you by Atlassian. Atlassian makes the team collaboration software that powers enterprise businesses around the world, including over 80% of the Fortune 500. With Atlassian's AI-powered software like Jira, Confluence, and Loom, you'll have more time to do the work that matters. In fact, Atlassian customers experience a 25% reduction in project duration per year. Unleash the potential of your team at Atlassian.com. Atlassian.
ABC Wednesday.
Y'all complain all day. We want books. We want paper towels in the classroom. Bet you want raises too.
I'm still waiting on the paper towels.
Abbott Elementary returns with a new season.
We asked the district for more after-school programs. They gave us $50 for class pets instead.
Critics cheer. Abbott Elementary continues to be one of the funniest and most beloved shows on TV.
What y'all doing out there?
Taking bribes.
Proud of y'all.
Abbott Elementary. Season premiere Wednesday, 9:30, 8:30 Central on ABC and stream on Hulu.
If you are interested in listening to every single episode of this podcast ad-free with no interruptions, then you could subscribe to 3D Printing Basics through Patreon, Spotify, or Apple Music. Every single link will be in the show notes below. Thank you for supporting, and if you're not, no worries, just enjoy this episode. Hello, and welcome back to 3D Printing Basics. This is episode number 34, and in this episode, we are going to be focusing on specialty filaments, more specifically wood and carbon fiber filaments. Something I would like to say before we get into either of these filaments is please don't use a brass nozzle when you are using these filaments. A brass nozzle is not made for filaments that have these abrasives in it, whether it's wood fibers or it's carbon fiber. Your brass nozzle is not going to be able to hold up. It's going to act like sandpaper on the nozzle, and it's going to steadily wear it out and open up that nozzle diameter, and it's just not going to be good. So please don't use a brass nozzle. Use either steel or hardened steel, better yet, and take care of your printers. Thank you. All right, let's get into wood filament to start. So wood filament, as complicated as it would sound to have that in the 3D printing space, it's actually pretty simple. Most wood filament contains around 70% PLA filament and around 30% wood. And what the manufacturers do is they will take wood shavings or pieces of wood and they will just combine them with PLA filament. It's really quite simple, much simpler than carbon fiber, as we will get into in a second. But wood filament is very, very interesting because when you are printing with it, if you do it right, it actually comes out looking, feeling, and even smelling just like actual wood. So if you treat it right, then you can get some really realistic looking prints, and that's why wood filament is so popular. Something to watch out for, or maybe not watch out for, but something you can take advantage of, is the nozzle temperature when you are using wood filament. So wood filament in general uses pretty much the same temperature settings as normal PLA. You want to keep it in between 170 to 230 degrees Celsius nozzle temperature, and a bed temperature, while it's not necessary if you are going to be using heated bed, keep it around 50 to 70 degrees Celsius. And something that you can do that's really cool with wood filament is because it's wood, if you get it too hot, then you can burn it. But you can actually take advantage of it, and by having a variation of your nozzle temperature while you're printing, you can burn parts of the print while not burning other parts, and therefore creating really cool color variations. I've just seen some examples of people who will write a program that lets the nozzle temperature vary during their print, and so it will burn some parts of the wood filament and not other parts while it's printing. And this results in really, really cool looking variations in color. And I've seen people, it looks like actual wood grain. And so it looks super realistic because they were able to take advantage of varying the nozzle temperature and have it burn parts of the wood and not burn other parts. And it looks really cool. It's something you can take advantage of and get wood filament looking even more realistic than it already does. And one more thing about printing with wood filament is to use a wider diameter nozzle than what you normally use when you're 3D printing. If you listen to last episode that was all about nozzles, then you would know that 0.4 millimeter nozzles is what comes standard on almost every single 3D printer nowadays, but that is not going to be good enough or wide enough for wood filament. Wood filament, because it has wood fibers directly inserted into the PLA, it clogs a lot easier than normal filament does. And so please, if you are going to be using wood filament, use a wider nozzle diameter than 0.4. I would suggest a 0.6 millimeter nozzle or even a 0.8 millimeter nozzle. But either way, just make sure you're not using a 0.4 because that will substantially increase the risk of things clogging, and cleaning out a nozzle is already a pain in the butt, and especially it's going to be even more of a pain in the butt when you have something like a wood filament that has fibers in it. It's just going to make it that much harder to clean up. So please use a wider nozzle when you're using it. Another cool thing about printing with wood filament is the post-processing. Now, when you're printing with something like PLA, the post-processing technique is pretty straightforward, but something that I think is really cool about wood filament is that you can sand it just like regular wood. Normally, when you're sanding with PLA, you can't go too crazy because if you get the piece too hot, then it can start to melt or it can start to deform, and that would ruin your whole model. But with wood filament, since there's a good chunk that's actual wood, you can sand it just like regular wood, and you can get rid of the layer lines, and you can create subtle details, and you can just get the print post-processing looking really, really good. I've seen examples of wood filament printing that it looks just like actual wood. I wouldn't be able to tell the difference side by side. And I'm sure these people are putting a ton of effort into their post-processing technique, and I'm sure that that's taken a lot of time, but I'm sure that if you just put a little bit of time, maybe not as much as that, you could still end up with a really solid looking quality 3D print with wood PLA filament. All right, now that we've talked about wood filament, let's talk about carbon fiber. Carbon fiber is basically the filament used when it comes to industrial applications or things when people need things that are exceptionally strong and light. Carbon fiber is the best filament when it comes to the strongest prints for the lowest weight, obviously because of the carbon fiber that is infused in it. Carbon fiber filament uses actually a lot of different base materials. You can use carbon fiber 11, carbon fiber 12, you can use PEEK, you can use a lot of different things, and I'm not even going to pretend like I know what that is, but there are a lot of different bases. So if you need something specific, make sure you do your research before you buy a roll, just in case it may be a difference between you need carbon fiber 11 and you accidentally ordered carbon fiber 12. So make sure you're just on the lookout for that. Carbon fiber can be used in two different print types. It can be used in FDM printing as well as SLS printing. The only thing I'll say about SLS printing is it uses a carbon fiber powder in order to make it, and that stuff is really dangerous because that powder can become airborne really easily, and you do not want that stuff in your lungs. That's all I'm going to say about it. It's pretty straightforward. SLS printing, I've talked about it before, so if you would like, go back to my episodes about FDM printing, and I have included a little tidbit about SLS printing there. The next thing about carbon fiber is that it requires not just a steel nozzle, but a hardened steel nozzle. Carbon fiber filament, whether it's carbon fiber PLA, straight carbon fiber, or infused carbon fiber filament, it is the toughest stuff that you are going to run through your printer. The carbon fiber little pieces, whether you're using continuous carbon fiber or just little carbon fibers infused in a filament, that stuff is like sandpaper. It's really, really tough. It's super abrasive. And if you use anything other than a hardened steel nozzle, it will wear out really, really quickly. So make sure you are going to use a hardened steel nozzle. And for carbon fiber PLA specifically, because I feel like us in this community, we're going to be more interested in using infused PLA, like wood infused PLA or carbon fiber infused PLA, just because PLA is something that we are used to. It's something that's predictable and something that we are more likely to work with. So for carbon fiber PLA, make sure you keep the nozzle temperature, again, a hardened steel nozzle. Make sure you keep it between 200 and 230 based off what I could find, and keep a heated bed of 45 to 60 degrees. With that being said, I have seen carbon fiber filament that can go as high as a 300 degree nozzle temperature. So make sure when you're buying carbon fiber filament, you do your research and you find out what the temperature limits are, because if you have something like, say, an Ender 3 or a simple printer like that that is not capable of getting that high, and you buy the wrong filament without realizing it, you could really do some serious damage to your printer. So make sure you do your research and you get the correct roll, and you don't buy something that requires a 300 degree nozzle temperature when your printer can't even get that high. Now let's talk about cost. Carbon fiber is definitely up there among the most expensive filaments that you can get on the market, as it starts at about a minimum of $40 to $50 per roll and can get up to hundreds of dollars per roll depending on what you get, whether you're getting carbon fiber infused or you're getting continuous carbon fiber. And what I mean by that is carbon fiber infused filament is when there's lots of little carbon fibers that are just infused into a roll of, say, PLA. Continuous carbon fiber filament is when it has one long strand of carbon fiber running throughout the entire roll. And the difference between that is that if you print a certain way, then the continuous carbon fiber can be stronger than the infused carbon fiber. But I think for something that my audience is going to be printing, I don't think there's too much of a difference, or it's going to be something that's super necessary. But make sure you do your research. Again, it's super important with carbon fiber because the rolls are so expensive that you do your research and you get the roll that's best suited for you and your printer, because this stuff is really expensive. And the PLA version of carbon fiber filament is not toxic. It's pretty harmless, nothing crazy. But make sure you're not standing next to the printer while it's printing and breathe it in. If you have a printer that can, say, go in your garage and not in your bedroom, I would suggest using that printer to print your carbon fiber, because I mean, any filament that you print, it's going to be somewhat dangerous because essentially you're melting plastic, and obviously you don't want to be breathing that stuff in. But carbon fiber, with the tiny little infused bits of carbon fiber, that just adds a little bit more risk. So make sure you're just being extra careful whenever you're printing that stuff. But overall, I would say if you do your research and you get the correct roll of carbon fiber and you follow the print settings and you print things correctly, you will get the strongest parts that you can print off of just a hobby 3D printer. And they honestly look great. Carbon fiber has a good reputation for having prints that look really good off the bed, and you need very little or no post-processing, and you can just use it as is. Especially since people who are using carbon fiber are going to be using them for prototypes or in an industrial capacity where the post-processing finish or look of the part doesn't really matter. But carbon fiber overall, it's a really good filament for you to use, and it's really strong, it's really light, and if you wanted to get something that is as strong as you could probably get printing with something like an Ender 3, carbon fiber is definitely the way to go. And with that being said, that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you learned something about wood filament and carbon fiber filament. Please be sure to follow this podcast. I would really appreciate it. Your support means the world to me. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll talk to you next time.